Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It's going to look awkward if I did that intro twice because I didn't know we were live. But the Trump administration has made one of the most important decisions that I think we've all been waiting for. You see, we demand that deportations be at the level we were promised. Trump campaigned on leading the greatest mass deportation effort in American history. They are on track to hit 426,000 forced removals since January. That's a high number until you remember the fact that 20 million people poured into the country illegally in the 4 years Joe Biden occupied the White House. So we wanted the action to match the promise. But people often forget that it's not just Trump, it's not just Tom Homan and Kristi Noem at the Department of Homeland Security. There's a lot of moving parts with deportations. It's a major operation. There's also due process that's involved with that. So it's not, hey, you arrest someone and you put them on a plane the next day and they're going to be in Somalia or Mexico or wherever they originally came from before coming into the country. So it's a very complex process. You need detention facilities. And before January, we had virtually no detention space. Capacity was at record lows because they weren't detaining anyone. Everyone was just getting let through. In fact, they were turning detention facilities into processing centers to get these people into the country faster, which is a crazy opposite, right? We don't want the people, but they're using the facilities that are supposed to be used for deportations to process them in faster, which was bizarre. But anyways, so yeah, they need detention, and the administration, through the big beautiful bill, got Congress to approve tens of billions of dollars to improve and expand detention capacity. Alligator Alcatraz was built by Ron DeSantis in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, and that must have expanded detention capacity. But there's another thing. It's not just detention. Due process. Due process is really important in this country. We even give it to people who, quite frankly, shouldn't earn it. They didn't earn it at all. They get to have their day in court. Which is why it's so frustrating when liberals try to make it out like the administration is deporting citizens. The Maryland man. No, he was El Salvadoran. And he got deported back to El Salvador because he was in the country illegally. No, but he had a jab. Doesn't matter. He was in the country illegally. And he was a gang member. And he had an order to be removed from years ago. You have to remember, the administration right now is deporting people that had orders of removal over the years that the Biden regime just didn't care to find. This is the first administration in history that's doing interior immigration enforcement. When people look at Obama's deportation numbers, they go, oh, he was the deporter in chief. Yeah, he deported a lot of people, but those were people that they apprehended at the border and brought them to detention facilities near the border and then took them back. It's very different. You have ICE, Border Patrol, DEA, FBI, and all these other agencies going door to door, workplace to workplace, conducting these interior raids. It's very different and it's more complex. And that's why we have a huge standoff between these lunatics on the left and ICE agents. But anyways, you need due process for these people, and they get it for whatever reason. And we have immigration judges in the country. A lot of them, actually. And those are the judges. They're not like Article 3 judges that the Constitution created. Immigration judges are different. The immigration court system was provided to the nation by Congress. Congress appropriates their funds. Congress regulates what they're able to do. And the president and the attorney general appoint all immigration judges, and they answer to the president ultimately. So they are part of the executive branch, not the judicial. Immigration judges can determine how quick deportations go, because they are the ones processing all of these things. And ladies and gentlemen, the Trump administration has been on a firing spree. And recently they made some big decisions in New York, as well as San Francisco, the Bay Area, firing a bunch of immigration judges. Let's look into the story now. We're reading from the New York Times. Let's start up top here. So the Trump administration fires 8 immigration judges in New York. Good. The administration, the firings followed an earlier round of job cuts in New York, immigration cuts, and are part of a broader disruption across the country, which is taking place as the president seeks to accelerate deportations. I love reading that. Accelerate deportations. Yeah, here's what's going to happen in January. And by the way, I don't care how cheap the New York Times makes their articles. I'm not paying them $1, okay? I don't know why they're advertising that to me. Wrong target audience. I don't read the New York Times. I just don't take them seriously. So the administration wants to accelerate deportations. Tom Homan said 10,000 new ICE agents were hired, as well as Border Patrol agents. A lot of new hires in those two agencies there. And what we're waiting for is for the onboarding process to be complete, and that's going to be complete sometime early next year. So in a few months, ICE and Border Patrol are going to have all these resources. They've also been building their surveillance apparatus, building law enforcement partnerships on the ground in all the various states and cities. So we are going to see deportations skyrocket. Homan said they're going to triple. So if they're deporting a couple thousand people per day, actually, let's do the math. So it's been 11 months. So far, deportations are forced deportations. There's a difference because self-deportations also happen, but we're looking specifically at forced deportations. That's about 38,000 a month if it's 420,000 so far this year since the administration. And if that's 38,000 a month, we can divide that by 30, which is how many days on average in each month. That's about 1,200 removals per day. That's pretty big, and it'd be greater if 20 million people didn't come in, right? So the number looks small compared to the larger number. So if they're able to triple that, that was the whole point of me pulling out the calculator, and then that's almost 4,000 a day. Multiply that by 30. That's 100,000 a month, 114,000. Multiply that by 12. That's 1.3 million removals in a year, starting next year. That could be unbelievable, actually. That would make it the greatest mass deportation effort in the country. It'd be a great operation. Right. So these judges were confirmed by an official act at the National Association of Immigration Judges, a union, so the firings of these judges got confirmed. All the judges were dismissed from the immigration court's offices at 26 Federal Plaza, a building that houses the New York City headquarters for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency and has become the epicenter of migrant arrest in the city. The 8 judges included Amina Khan. You can tell what her disposition is towards immigration just by looking at that last name. That's a very Middle Eastern last name, we'll put it that way. So that's one of the judges who got fired, and a judge that actually supervises other judges. So pretty significant. The court has been basically eviscerated, said Olivia Casson, who was fired from her job as an immigration judge at another New York City courthouse in November. Ms. Casson said that she had the job for more than a decade. Well, that's why you sucked at it. Because if you've had it for that long and we've had the immigration crisis that we've had, then that means you didn't do your job correctly. Feels like a Monday afternoon massacre. Okay. Both immigration judges who were fired earlier this year suggested that the administration was targeting judges who were considered too lenient and was also trying to create a feeling of fear. Good. They should be fearful. They could get fired if they continue to be lenient. All of the judges are now sitting speculating about whether they're next, or all the other judges, of course, and the impact that they may have in their ability to remain impartial and do their jobs fairly. Well, that's it. Now, here's the bigger number. So since January, 100 immigration judges have been fired or pushed out since Trump took office. That's amazing, right? And also, they're hiring new federal judges. It's not like they're just firing, or not federal judges, immigration judges. It's not like they're just firing these people and then not replacing them. They're replacing them as we speak. But right now, that number is down to roughly 600 as they hire new people. And here's the problem. You can have an immigration judge delay a deportation for literally months by slow running and putting that administrative hurdle and burden on the deportation officers, on the government, by making hearings take weeks and months instead of days. When someone gets apprehended, they should immediately have their day in court and then deported the next day. But if you really think about it, the people that got deported in November probably got arrested 4 months before that, and they'd been waiting in detention, or 2 months before that. And that's a problem. That's a huge backlog, because some judges are slowing down the process, because to them, if they slow down the administration, 4 years are going to come by real quick. And suddenly you might have a new administration, and God forbid it's a Democrat one, then everything gets reversed. So it's really important that the Trump team has been on top of this. Plus, you don't need congressional consent to get new immigration judges in. You just need to interview people. And they posted an ad that they're looking for new immigration judges all across the country. And they were offering a huge bonus. So I think it was like $25,000 or $50,000, maybe the same thing as the offer to ICE agents. And so they're recruiting and interviewing a lot of new deportation judges rather. And it speeds up the process. It means that if people are arrested in January of 2026, they're going to be gone and out of the country 2 weeks after that, in the same January. That's the goal here, because that frees up a lot of space in detention facilities. Right now, I think Tom Homan said they're operating at like 90% occupancy. All the beds have been taken up, or probably higher than 90%, had to be closer to 100. They're not operating as smoothly as they should. So firing hundreds of, I think it's up to 140 now, I read somewhere. And these are the stories from all the different cities that me and Grok, we're like a super team. You guys won't believe it, but it's always me doing most of the work, not Grok. I don't just ask Grok to put a list together for me based on the stories that are out recently. I do it, and then I just give Grok some credit. So yesterday they fired the 8 out of New York, and that's a 20% reduction. There aren't really that many immigration judges, right? You saw there 715 when Trump got into office, and now it's 600. So there aren't really that many. It's not like millions. So when you fire 8 in a city, that's a lot. San Francisco also lost 5 a few weeks ago. I think up to 15 in the Bay Area have been fired so far. And in Boston, a few. These are just the recent stories. They fired way more than 100 across the country. So these judges had to go. They had to go because they were slowing down deportations. ICE can't operate the way they normally want to if they're begging courts within the jurisdiction of the executive branch, not even the Constitution or the judiciary. They were begging these judges to just allow the deportations to go smoothly. So here's what we're going to be seeing. A lot of new judges are going to be hired, and it's probably going to be conservative lawyers. And I think the administration is going to put a lot of effort into vetting each applicant to make sure that they actually understand the law and not just give leniency to anyone, because that's what these now fired immigration judges were doing. Someone would walk in and they'd probably get a scenario that goes something like this. My family, they're suffering in Mexico. They're suffering. Me no speak good English. They suffer in Mexico. Please, Your Honor, please, Judge, grant asylum. And the judge doesn't consider the fact that Mexico is not a country in literal war. There's a lot of cartel activity. But not every person that claims the cartels are coming after them is actually being truthful about that. They're not being forthcoming. But the judge is going to look at it. If they're a liberal-minded immigration judge, they'll go, oh, well, we want as many of you in the country. Oh, you work under the table, fine, I'll give you the asylum. And that's kind of how it goes. That's leniency. Instead of just reading the law that says they have to establish real fear, credible fear, they have to have evidence of that fear, they have to have all these supporting documents. And the law is very clear. The law says exactly how you get asylum, how you get an H-1B or B2 or all the other visas. The law, the immigration law in the country is very clear. People say, oh, we need more laws to enforce. No, we need to enforce the existing laws, because that's the problem. We have judges in the immigration courts that will look at the law that says they need to establish real fear, and they'll just go, he said he was scared at the Sinaloa cartel. He said they're in his part of Mexico, so I guess I can't send them back. That's dumb leniency. And everyone's going to have a sob story. And by the way, most of them don't show up to court. It's only after and during the deportation proceeding that they try to argue some case. Most of them don't show up to their court dates when they're granted those court dates. If I was an illegal under Joe Biden, I would have just pursued as fast as I could a legal avenue to establish nexus, to establish residency. I would have done everything in my power. But you know what happens? I think there's a widespread criticism in the Latino community that I have a lot of Mexican friends, and they tell me this all the time, that Mexicans will spend money on their daughter's quinceañeras, their 15th birthday, their quinceañera, right? But not on a lawyer to establish legal residency in the state they're in. And it's only when a president comes in and starts talking about deportations that they start freaking out. But some of them would have been here for 20 years, and they never tried to establish legality in the United States, legal presence. They didn't even try to marry some lesbian for a green card. Like, find you a liberal 55-year-old woman who thought she could be a boss babe and is husbandless. Marry her for some green cards, for some papers, for pepa. Marry her. But they won't do that. They'll spend money on their quinceañeras, spend money on remittance, I don't even know how to say it, payments back home to Mexico, and they won't spend money on a lawyer, a couple $1,000s on a lawyer, investing in their family's security in the United States. And that's a huge problem. There's people that have been in the United States, in the country, for 20 years, and they won't get any kind of legal presence done. So, but you have immigration judges that look past that. If someone's been in the country for 10 years and this is the first time they're showing up in a court, because look, if you live in a Democrat state city, it's a sanctuary area. You can't get arrested in court. Well, not unless Donald Trump is in the White House, right? Yeah, Trump is changing that. He's actually enforcing immigration laws all over the place. And I see these videos where they're so annoying, where a migrant or an illegal is leaving a courthouse and then ICE will be waiting for them outside the courthouse. And then liberal media will say, oh, see, Trump is nabbing people at courthouses even after they're trying to finally get their papers. No, you don't understand. ICE knew that those people had orders of final removal, and they were in violation of those orders, probably from years ago. And now that Trump is going after them and actually trying to deport them, now they're crawling back to court because their immigration lawyers, paid for by George Soros and these other dark, sinister figures, have told them that, oh, now is your chance to at least try and get a little bit legal. Make it look like you're trying to be legal. But they already had those orders of removal. So when ICE comes in and nabs them and takes them into their van and goes into the bathroom and arrests them, or just follows them and puts them into their trucks, cars to take to the detention facility, it's because they already had their due process. They had a final order of removal, but they stayed in the country illegally. Or they never tried to go to court in the first place. So they didn't have a final order of removal, but they're in the country illegally. And ICE, using their targeting technology and intel on the ground, knows exactly where they are. And that's another misconception about ICE. And it's sad that they're getting the level of hatred from half the country. It's really sad because they're just enforcing the law. I thought Democrats were the party of just following orders when COVID was happening. When cops were told to do all kinds of crazy things, they were just following orders. But now you have ICE doing something that is actually good for the country. And they won't see it the same way. They won't see it as them following orders. They'll insult them, and it's insane how badly they treat ICE. But the misconception is ICE goes around and they just randomly knock on doors. I uploaded the video recently about Ilhan Omar freaking out because ICE is now all over Minneapolis. They're in all kinds of Somali neighborhoods and they're knocking on doors. And someone was like, why are they walking away like without arresting someone? That's because they're not just doing what the media says, which is arrest anyone that looks Somali. They have actual targets. These are targeted operations. They are looking first and foremost for people with orders of final removal, and that's millions. We still have millions of those people left. Out of the 400,000 that have been deported so far, all of them would have had final orders of removal. They didn't just deport anybody. I think we're probably starting to cut down on that number of outstanding orders of final removals. But once that number is cut down enough, then they'll start going after the general cases, the people who really aren't legal but have never been in a court in any way because they're hiding. They think if they can just, flee states. We're talking about visa overstays and all kinds of different versions of illegal presence in the United States. But they have these targets, and they know where the targets are. They understand patterns of life. Like ICE isn't just like, a bunch of macho dudes going around neighborhoods and just, hey, are you illegal? Yeah, they'll ask questions to try and get those people to admit it so as to develop that evidence that can be used against them in the court of law. But most of the times, they already know who they're going after. They know exactly, like they don't just show up to a job site and go, you look Mexican. I was going to do a Mexican accent, but I forgot I'm doing an ICE impression. So I can't, the Mexicans would say, no, me no speak English. But no, they'll know who that person is. And they might ask, are you such and such? And if that person says yes, then there we go. They already have the probable cause, which is a final order of removal. And then they'll take that person to the detention center. And even after then, they'll get another day in court before a final removal, especially if that order came years ago. So ICE isn't just going around neighborhoods and like looking at random people and going, you don't look like a legal resident here. You look like an illegal. No, there's millions. Like, to deport 400,000 people, you had to know who they were. And a lot of these people think they're hiding, but the problem is that might have been true under Obama, under Biden, because you had presidents that didn't want to enforce in the interior. So if they just lived their best lives, they would have never been caught. But right now we have a president who is actually doing interior enforcement, and all the information is already out there. They know exactly where these people are. We know the neighborhoods they'll live in. There was a part of Aurora that I went to where everyone was illegal. And everyone knew they were illegal. But it was like, okay, whatever. We're not going to get arrested because this was during Joe Biden's regime. But now I'm sure ICE is all over that place. ICE shows up routinely to these neighborhoods and have different targets each time. So it's quintessential what the president has done by firing all these immigration judges. Now it's about hiring people who are fast. Due process doesn't mean slow process. Notice how we have a right to a fair and speedy trial. Now, of course, that's a different situation, but speedy is important. There's an expectation of speed, that you're not going to be suffering at the hands of prosecutors for a long time. Let's apply that same thing in the immigration courts. Speedy, just the speedy part. It can be fair too. It can be fair if someone has a legitimate reason for asylum. Well, then they wouldn't have crossed into the country illegally, because they would have gone to the first country they came into. You don't fly from India to Brazil and then go through the jungles of Paraguay and Panama, go through the Darien Gap, go through Mexico, pay the cartels off so they can give you passage through the desert, and then seek asylum in the United States after. Like, come on, that's not real asylum. But that's what we have. That's what we have. So we are going to see real immigration enforcement from a legal perspective. And I'm running out of time here. I have to be somewhere in a second. But yeah, really awesome to see what the Trump administration is doing. Let's look at some of these comments here. Keep up the good reporting. I like your channel. Daniel doesn't know how we roll around here. We have a rule. If you donate money on this channel, you must say something in roast. You must, whatever. You guys already know. Always like hearing from truth tellers and a good researcher. Thank you for doing what you do. See? Sappiness. This is what we don't like around here. He doesn't know. He'll learn. Okay, we don't like sappiness. We don't like thank yous. We only want to. I just want to hear you guys complain. You know, before I leave, I did want to just touch briefly on what the president did today in the Oval Office. He signed an order terminating Biden's Green New Deal standards for automakers, which do nothing but drive up cost, according to my great friend Nick Sorter. That's the fuel economy mandates terminated, Biden's tailpipe emissions regulations terminated, and Biden's emissions waiver for Newsom's California terminated as well. Those are very important policies from the president. And it's a affordability policy, right? Because regulations are taxes on the American people, because they force corporations to do things in a more expensive way, and they pass down those costs to consumers, which is exactly what they accuse tariffs of doing, yet they won't admit the same for a more obvious case in regulations that they put out. So what we're going to see is cheaper manufacturing for cars, a better business environment for automakers, which will mean cheaper, well, not cheaper labor. It's going to mean more money can be paid to workers, and also lower cost for cars. I think the regulations cost everybody like $109 billion, and it was adding an additional $1,000 for cars because of these stupid emissions and fuel standards that they applied. And it's interesting because a bunch of leftists were saying, oh, but why can't these corporations just innovate? Innovation is something that happens out of convenience for businessmen. Business people don't just get up one day and try to innovate. That's something that is unique about capitalism. Capitalism says we will only create a good environment for these people to innovate. We're not going to force them. We're not going to force the market to do anything it doesn't want to do. And what's funny is we always get more innovation when the government isn't all on everyone's necks, just trying to push innovation down our throats. So, hilariously, the money the automakers are going to save will give them more to pour into research and development. And they're going to come up with better things, better standards for fuel. And they're going to make things that, I guess, produce less CO2, even though it's great for trees. Yeah, I think the earth is greener now than it's ever been. We got to keep pumping that oil out of the ground. We got to keep using natural gas because clearly it's helping the trees out. They're eating a lot of carbon. But anyways, huge news from the president. Also, some news that I probably need to make a separate video about. He pardoned Henry Cuellar. Now, I'll be honest. When I saw the news, I was like, oh my gosh, why is he pardoning a Democrat that got indicted for bribery using shell companies? There's a political angle to it all. He got a letter from Henry Cuellar, and by the way, that's someone who voted to impeach him. Like Henry Cuellar voted to impeach Trump when he was facing those impeachments years back. But I thought about it, and strategically it makes sense because you isolate Hakeem Jeffries from one of his members. Now Henry Cuellar owes Trump a favor politically. But he hadn't been convicted by a jury. The case was still going to trial. So he hadn't been convicted. So it was more of an indictment. And that indictment only came because he was critical of the Biden regime for opening the border. Henry Cuellar did one thing right, and that was criticize the open border when Biden was resident in chief. So him doing that made an enemy out of Merrick Garland, who wanted to throw him in jail. And what it says about the system is how they'll literally just... Almost everyone is guilty of a crime in Congress, right? More Democrats than Republicans, but almost all of them. Okay, they're guilty of some kind of crime in the system. Stock trading, insider knowledge, all of these little financial crimes. And this guy had shell companies receiving money from foreign banks for favors. Like, come on. Like, it was pretty obvious he was in some deep trouble. But he only really got prosecuted because he was going after the Biden regime. But we don't know what goes through Trump's mind. I mean, he must have gotten this letter and went, you know what, look, he's an old guy, he's 70 years old, and they're only going after him because he stood up for the truth. So let me reward him for standing up for the truth, even though it's a weird reward because it's a prosecution that only happened because of what he said. So yeah, maybe Trump's viewing it like, hey, let's let this kind of go over and just move on from this. All right. Intrepid says, keep up the good work. Or keep it up, good man. There's none good but Jesus. Okay? None good but God. Yeah. I got a comment. Someone was like, because I made a gay joke. The crazy sin of making a gay joke. And someone said, but you spoke about Jesus in the same show. And I'm like, well, I didn't answer, but I was like, hey, that's because I'm not Jesus. I'm very sinful like everybody. That's kind of the whole point of the gospel, actually, that we've all fallen short. Okay, all right, I got to get out of here. Lord, I pray that everyone is strengthened and given crazy knowledge. I pray, God, for our Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Tom Homan and everyone involved in this giant operation, this heavily criticized operation by the other side. Lord, I pray that they are strengthened and given wisdom so they can lead this operation to its inevitable end. In Jesus' name, amen. And people might be like, would Jesus want deportations? Well, look, we are in Caesar's world, so we're going to follow Caesar's rules. And Caesar made laws that we have borders. This is the earth, okay? This is the fallen world where countries exist and divisions exist. People are divided. They're not together. So Jesus is, of course, a critical member of our society. But this is not the kingdom, his true kingdom yet, right? So we're going to have laws here, and they're going to be enforced. And guess what? It's good for the countries that get their engineers back. They're in a serious way, though. These countries need to improve. They have to be forced to improve, to care for the interest of their citizens. Trump is putting America first. Why can't the president of Somalia put Somalia first? Why doesn't India put their people first? So by deporting everyone that needs to be deported, you really are restoring law and order, and you're helping everybody else out too. And also, it's unfair for anyone else if one part of the system is completely broken. If IRS tax laws are enforced, but not the more important immigration laws. But anyways, thank you all very much for watching. God bless, and good night. I might do another live stream later tonight, or it might be a video. I'm still figuring that part out. All right, bye.